kick us off, please.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Robert. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us here this morning. We're going to be addressing the topic of overcoming supply chain challenges and successfully managing the post-Brexit transition trade. So that's going to be our topic this morning. In a few seconds here, in a minute or so, I'll introduce the participants. In terms of the format, we're going to show a couple of slides to set the scene, and then we'll come back and take questions and enter into a Q&A discussion and looking for a good sort of informal sort of interactive chat here this morning on what is a pretty topical subject if the national news coverage at the moment is anything to go by. So I'm just going to start by introducing the panel participants here today. So we have Bernard Connor, who's a partner with Strong and Herd, all things customs, consultancy experts, and very knowledgeable in the whole customs arena. We also have Alistair Garbett, who's a customs and excise manager from Bacardi, joining us here today as well. So Bacardi with lots of fantastic favorites in there in terms of brands as well beyond Bacardi, with Blue Sapphire being probably one of the ones that is my most favorite in there. We then, from Descartes here this morning, we have Martin Meacock, who's Director of Product Management for Customs and Compliance Solutions in Descartes. And joining us as well will be Tim O'Mahony, who's the Shipping Network Manager for GB Agencies, the GBA Group, who are a major importer of cars, automobiles into the UK, and they handle around about 2 million cars a year coming into the UK, predominantly through Grimsby. So we'll get started here in a minute with the Q&A, but first I'm going to try and manage the technology and show some slides here. So let me just start this off, and hopefully I'll be able to share those with you in a moment. Sorry. So let me just share the screen. So hopefully everybody can see the slides here. So just basing this on is that earlier this year we did Descartes did a survey in the UK just to look at the readiness for Brexit of UK companies, and it's available as a white paper as well to download. So just in terms of the survey itself, some of the goals of research survey was to understand the readiness of UK importers and exporters for the end of the transition period, so the end of the Brexit transition period, which is the 31st December 2020, so end of this calendar year essentially. Here are just some of the goals that we had, trying to get expectations around the impact of Brexit, levels of concern, preparedness, any steps that they've already taken to prepare for the impact of Brexit on supply chains, and there are also their expectations. And given what occurred in February, March time and the lockdown, COVID-19, also wanted to get a view on how that had impacted their ability to prepare as well. So in terms of the survey itself and the respondents and the demographics, it was UK based. It was across supply chains, larger businesses, and also sole traders. We did a cross spectrum of the individuals that we were surveying, from sort of senior management roles, executive roles, and other levels also within organizations in middle management. We also tried to cover a broad range of businesses in terms of size of companies, from sole traders up the way, and across the business sectors as well that we thought were relevant here. Top three are shown there. Retail was about 19% of the respondents, the sort of electronic goods, 16% of the respondents, and then engineering and manufacturing, 11%. And then also in terms of, sort of where they supply chains were coming from, going to 79% importing from the EU, 82% exporting to the EU, and then there was other non-EU imports and exports in the groups as well. So very quickly, top level findings. Certainly COVID-19 has had an impact on people's ability and plans for preparing for Brexit, with over 2/3 of businesses saying that COVID had a direct impact on their ability to get their Brexit preparations in place in there. Also, in terms of confidence in the administrative burden of Brexit, very low confidence that it would be smooth in terms of administrative burden. So less than 23% believing that they would be able to cope with the extra administration that Brexit would put in place. Then probably one of the largest responses here, so over 2/3 of the larger firms that were surveyed were extremely concerned about the possibility of long delays or longer delays in their supply chain due to the impact of Brexit. In terms of then feeling that they were prepared for a no-deal Brexit, less than a fifth, so less than 1 in 5 respondents felt that they were prepared for a no-deal Brexit or understood the implications of a no-deal Brexit. And then in terms of sort of the fallback option for traders here of using somebody else to help them and brokerages to help them handle the impact of Brexit, a lot of concern here about the ability for customs brokerage market to manage the capacity increase due to Brexit. So over or almost 3/4 of the respondents were concerned about that. Then customs declarations themselves, 40%, 2/5 of those responding concerned about their ability and how would they achieve customs declarations for Brexit as well in there. Just calling out a couple of things. Certainly, lack of certainty of what was going to happen there. So in terms of the current relationship of the status for the UK with EU, even in July when this was taken, sort of there's still 25% of the respondents believe that the UK was still a member of the EU. 53% knew that we'd left the EU, but were in the transition period, but still a large number uncertain about what the actual status was out there. And then in terms of understanding and knowing what the full effects of Brexit would be and how that would be felt in your business, a lot of lack of clarity around this as well. With 23% believing it was going to feel this in the next 3 to 6 months. So basically now through to the end of the calendar year. 36% with a view that it would be from 2021 onwards, which is probably reasonably accurate. 20% feeling they already had been impacted by Brexit. And there's 16% not really knowing what to expect to really change there. So quite a bit of uncertainty and lack of clarity out there. So that was really, sort of it in terms of just some slides to position the discussion here this morning. And I think maybe if we will kick off the conversation here now, and please post your questions if you'd like us to address online here. But I'm going to start with a question around free trade agreements, which is clearly very topical and in the news at the moment. And there appears to be confusion on whether a free trade agreement will remove the need for customs declarations or not. So the reality is a free trade agreement between the EU and the UK or not, customs declarations will still be required. So maybe if we started with the panel and just got their maybe an explanation, sort of the basic explanation of why that is the case, and welcome Tim to the panel here as well. I'm going to probably maybe start with Martin Leacock. So Martin, if you could maybe just address the question of free trade agreement and why are customs declarations still required, even though there may be a free trade agreement between the EU and the UK. Martin.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, it is. There's a lot of confusion. It's not helped maybe with some of the statements, the belief that everything will be solved by a free trade agreement. And it's true to say that free trade agreements can cover a wide range of things, not just trade. They can cover services, financial services, mutual recognition, phytosanitary and sanitary standards and checks, even maybe security. But they're not a customs union. So the big difference is a free trade agreement is normally a reduction of tariffs between the parties, where a customs union is having a common external tariff and rules. But even with a customs union, even if we'd gone that far, that still wouldn't have been the frictionless trade that we have currently or had under the single market. It was really the single market arrangements in 1st of January 93 that really allowed that free movement of goods without any kind of customs formalities or declarations. And in fact, a free trade agreement adds some complexity and bureaucracy to the process, because to benefit under a free trade agreement, you then have to meet certain rules of origins. So you need to know whether the products that you have qualify as originating to get a reduced rate. So again, there's probably not enough said about imported goods. You know, if a company is importing goods from China or the US into the UK, that's not necessarily going to mean that they qualify for reduced rates into Europe. You know, will they be sufficiently processed in the UK to qualify? But the fact remains a free trade agreement doesn't remove the need for any kind of customs declaration, imports or exports. It could remove the need for security declarations, but so far the UK position seems to be they want a Canada-style arrangement. So they're not looking for any kind of mutual recognition on security standards, which would remove the need for an entry summary declaration. So yes, free trade agreements are good. It may simplify a number of areas, may address some of the issues in Northern Ireland in terms of standards and phytosanitary standards, but it doesn't remove the overall need for customs declarations.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And Bernard, do you want to maybe add a little bit to what Martin had covered there?
Let me just unmute myself and say good morning. Just to add to what Martin has said, is that with or without a free trade agreement, there will be customs declarations. I think the trick is how easy it is to do the customs declaration, whether we do a simplified declaration under easements that are proposed by the UK government, or whether we have to do a full frontier declaration. But whatever sort of a customs declaration it is, there will have to be customs declarations, and of course there will have to be an export a customs declaration from the United Kingdom, and it logically follows that there will have to be an import declaration into the EU 27. And so FTA or no FTA, there will still be customs entries, and I think we have to just grasp that and proceed on the basis that come the 1st of January 2021, there will be customs entries.
Okay, thanks, Bernard. And then I was going to maybe just address the next question to maybe Alistair and then Tim as well. So the next question is around delays and delays impacting supply chains due to Brexit. That was probably the highest concern that came out of the research that we carried out in July. So maybe just starting with Alistair, do you want to maybe just give a view on what you're doing to try and minimize those delays, and how concerned maybe you are with those as well, or how much that sort of featured in your Brexit planning and Brexit readiness?
Yes, good morning. We've given it a lot of consideration over the last 3 years. We've been working towards assuming a no deal all the way through. So on that basis, we've considered every route that we think is viable in and out of the UK. And then our approvals that we've gone and put in place for each of the Bacardi companies in the UK and also with our partners are designed to try and minimise either materials coming in for our production companies or for finished goods going out in or out of the UK using things like community transit. We're using inward processing relief for bringing liquid into the UK because of the tariffs that will be in place from 1st of January. So we're trying to minimise both our liabilities and also which routes will be most efficient for us to minimise any impact of delays coming into the UK.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. And Tim, do you want to maybe just cover what your views are in terms of minimising the delays and how significant you feel that is as a risk, and how you how you've addressed that, or how you plan to address that?
Well, a lot of our OEMs, considering that we deal with the automotive industry, have redirected their product away from the pinch point of Dover, Felixstowe. Some of the products have been completely rerouted into northern, less busy port areas because they have major concerns over the possible delay of those particular areas. Our OEMs that we deal with predominantly are looking for guaranteed routing. And the idea of just-in-time product to the manufacturing sites for Oxford, BMW, and Bentley, and Rolls-Royce is causing them a huge concern because of the pure storage facilities that they have in place for their part regeneration of 17 hours in some cases. So they're having to really reconsider that whole logistic process around the potential delays that are going to occur, rightly so, through either the French border or the UK border at that particular pinch point.
Okay, very good, thank you. And Martin, Bernard, do you want to comment on alleviating delays?
I think if I could just say that the situation might be slightly different on the Irish Sea than it will be in the English Channel or the North Sea. There's a limited amount of ports that connect with the Republic of Ireland, and I certainly would be trying to, if I was an exporter to the Republic of Ireland, I would certainly be looking at that all of my options, perhaps not just the short crossing from Holyhead to Dublin, but maybe looking at Liverpool, Birkenhead, looking at Heysham here in Lancashire, Pembroke, Fishguard. But I'd certainly be wanting to, as Alistair said, I'd be certainly wanting to spread my options to try and avoid that situation where I'm queuing for a ferry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it is one about mitigating the risk and trying to spread that risk, and not having all your eggs in one basket. It's that constant reminder there are two sides to a border. So whatever you look at this side of the border in terms of whether a particular port looks particularly attractive to go through for export, you got to think at where you're going to end up on the other side. Do you want to go into Calais, or do you want to go into Zeebrugge? Do you want to go into one of the smaller French ports, or maybe further south into Spain? Obviously, that's largely dictated by where your goods are going to end up. But it's another consideration. Oftentimes, when we're talking about Brexit, we seem to just talk about one side of the border without thinking about what's going to happen on the other side, either before the goods arrive or after they've left.
And just on, in terms of trying to make that movement more smooth, more predictable in terms of times, obviously there's the declarations and preparing your declarations. Other techniques and mechanisms out there that you can use? I know Alistair mentioned, NCTS and transit movements. Anything else, or how would you be able to maybe just give a view on how transit sort of helps with that predictability of getting through the ports?
Yeah, that's sure. I mean, for sure, the doing the declarations in advance is in some cases going to be mandatory. In other cases, it's going to be beneficial, advisory. There are a number of, we know, shipping lines that won't allow you to book unless you've done your customs declaration into the country you're going to. That doesn't mean that it's going to be frictionless on the other side, but the idea of trying to reduce the congestion as much as possible, any kind of delays. Transit, there are a number of benefits to transit. One, that you can move through the immediate port of arrival for clearance elsewhere. So you may decide that you don't want to clear in France, particularly if the goods are going to be for delivery in the Netherlands or Germany, Poland or Eastern Europe. You may want to drive through and discharge your transit movement and do your customs clearance in the country of consumption. Maybe that's at your customer's request. Transit also allows you to start the movement inland in the UK as well. So again, it would avoid any kind of need to present yourself officially, if you like, at the point of exit. But there are a number of systems that the customs authorities are implementing. We know there's GVMS being mentioned in the UK. The French have talked about their logistics envelope. In the Netherlands and Belgium, the port systems have a means of pre-notifying MRN numbers, the movement reference numbers as well. Irish Customs have just published a portal for their movements. So it's not just about the customs declaration. The customs declaration is an important part, which is needed, is mandatory at some point, but it's also getting that information, getting the references, because it may not be the shipper that's doing the import declaration. So how do they get the reference numbers to pass on to their haulier, to put into a logistics envelope or to the booking to ensure they can move overseas? So it's about ensuring that you've got those clear lines of communication between all the parties. That's going to be key in trying to mitigate any delays.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And maybe just before we leave this topic, I'll go back to Alistair and Tim. So you guys have put a lot of effort into preparedness for Brexit. In July, when we did the survey in the UK, we had sort of over, it was 2/3 of the respondents being very concerned about delays to the supply chain and impacts of longer delays in the supply chain. How would you rate it for yourselves now that, with the level of preparedness that you have, how concerned would you be today about the delays that you potentially may see in your supply chains? Maybe I'll start with Tim on that one.
Sorry, let me just turn that off. Sorry, apologies. My major concerns really are that some OEMs are recognizing that what is required of them to complete potential documentation is actually beyond their means. We've had a major OEM come to us 6 weeks ago asking us to review some very difficult processing. And to me, it's very late. This should have been done 2 years ago, not really sort of 3 months prior to commencement of requirement. So I am concerned that every time the phone rings and someone's saying to me it's a potential customer, it's how we have the growth potential to actually fit those customers in to our current resource. So it's a major concern. I mean, we're comfortable that we've got all our current contracts resourced correctly and everything is in place. So we're sat here waiting now for process to start. But that phone call that comes along and says, I've got 66,000 supplementary declarations a month that need checking against documentation. Can you provide that service? That's the headache that some of our customers are coming to us, and we're sort of, well, you should have asked us a year ago, not 3 months prior to some disturbing trends over the last few weeks that are people waking up to the reality again as they and there is not a finite amount of resource out there to be able to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay, good. And I think that topic, we're probably going to come back to that topic again as well on resource. But maybe I'll ask the same question just on Alistair to get a view there as well, just in terms of how well you feel the preparations that you've put in place enable you to be less concerned about delays at ports and on the supply chain, or is that still the concern?
I think for Bacardi as a group, because we've been working on this the last 3 years, it's cross-functional. So it's been every function in the group, both in the UK and Europe. We've also made sure that our brokers are in place on both sides of the channel to be able to manage the capacity and the changes between the current flows of import, export, or EMCS as it is today. So we tried really hard to make sure that all of our provisions are in place ahead of time. Certainly, other companies that we're aware of have not been quite as proactive, but we're working also closely with our partners, whether they be co-packers or distributors, to make sure that not only are their approvals aligned with our Bacardi companies, but they're following the same processes. We are keeping touch base to make sure that they are becoming as prepared as we are, so we can minimize as much as we can any impacts, and we can support them if they get stuck. And certainly our brokers are, under our agreements, are helping us with that process. Okay,
good. Cute. So I was going to move on maybe to a slightly different topic here, which it came up, which a question from the audience, which is about a statement from the government with Michael Gove in February pledging funds for the recruitment and training of 50,000 customs officers and agents. And I guess the question is saying that this individual living near Dover, they've seen little evidence of this recruitment drive. So I guess anybody got visibility or a view on how that recruitment is going? And there is probably a view that recruitment may actually end up being a recruitment of brokers resource. But any sort of insight into that? Maybe Bernard, if I start with yourself, Bernard.
Thanks, Paul. It's a difficult one to assess, but I can tell you from a training point of view that we have since halfway through 2018, 2019, there's been a huge increase in demand for traders wanting to learn how to complete both export and import customs declarations. And these are traders that are potential customs brokers, potential exporters, importers, but there has been a huge demand in training. I wouldn't be too concerned about looking at the environment surrounding Dover and wondering where all the customs brokers are. They don't actually have to be in Kent. I have clients who are in both Cork and Dublin in the Republic of Ireland, and they are registered to complete customs entries on sheep here in the United Kingdom. And there's no reason why they can't do those from Cork and from Dublin. So my own feeling on this, and the evidence is anecdotal, my own feeling is that there is a huge increase in interest in completing customs declarations, and I see it, day in, day out in the work that I do.
Okay, good. And Tim, you mentioned earlier there just about resourcing, and you'd resource up. You were confident you'd resource up in terms of your current contracts and so on. Are you, what are you seeing in your market for the potential to address significant increases in demand on you from a resource perspective?
It was very interesting in that if we go back to the original closing date for Brexit, our plan was to employ people directly and go through the training process. But as it was delayed, we switched to a contingency of agency employment for the contingency that we required, and we took agency on because of the understanding of the unknowing of whether or not Brexit would actually happen. It was an economic decision rather than, just taking people on and knowing that you're going to have to let them go. The agency profile was a lot easier to process. And this is the profile that we've duplicated again for our processing of customs declarations moving forward from 1st of January. Again, we understand the government, as you say, has provided this option of grant award, but our personal view on that is, yes, it's wonderful, but we really want to ensure that we've got sufficient people in place from day one, and we don't see the benefit currently of employing the actual grant process for those employees. But the benefit of agency is the flexibility of increasing or decreasing once you have a greater understanding of the actual call upon that resource on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Okay. And you're sort of been able to find those agencies and agents reasonably okay, Tim?
Yeah. As we go back, it was previously difficult, but because of the economic circumstances now, we find ourselves where there is the market is somewhat saturated. So there are some very skilled people out there who are looking for employment, and it's to their benefit that we can provide that opportunity, to be fair. So we're not seeing any struggle in obtaining the numbers that we actually require. I go back to my 66,000 declarations. We're going to need a team of 40 people to actually overcome that as a manual process, which is quite a dedicated stream of employees. And there will be a churn because of the repetitive nature of that specific business. But the agencies that we employ are quite confident that they will be able to supply those, and then we can then assess to turn them into long-term employees after a period of time.
Okay, very good, good. And Alistair, you mentioned use of brokerage as well in your model. How have you found the capacity and ability to get resource through your brokerage network?
I've been working with them both for some time, and they've both made sure that they've got sufficient capacity in place to cope with our volume as well as their other customers. But also that they've assured me they can help with our partner companies, because obviously that's going to be a relevant increase. Partly, as was referred to, some companies haven't been able to secure the right broker support for all their movements, and so by using us as part of that process, we can do it, because they're working with us as a company. So we're trying to almost facilitate that process as best as we can to make it easy for them as well as ourselves, because we have a vested interest in everything they do, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Good. Okay. So there's another question coming here just about car parks. I guess these are car parks in Kent that they're referring to, but probably elsewhere as well. But car parks being built around the UK, heard that they might be turned into offices of departure for transit. So the driver will go there, transit starts there, and just any insights into that topic that the panel has, and I'll come to Martin. Do you have any insights into the car parks being used as office of departure for transit?
The fact that I should have bought land around Kent about 5 years ago. I mean, it's a very good point, actually, because even the border operating model for exports, whether it's up to July or after July, anticipates that the export declarations themselves will be declared as arrived, in effect. So there's no need necessarily to stop and be arrived, as is the current process on exports today. Goods may be directed to places of inspection, which could be these inland car parks or pop-up shops or whatever we want to call them. But it is true on a transit movement, you have to start your movement somewhere. I kind of mentioned you can start them at your own premises if you get authorised consignor status. So that would allow the TAD, the travelling document, to be printed yourself at your own premises. But yeah, if a trader doesn't have an authorised consignor status, they have to go somewhere to start the movement. They can pre-declare the transit movement, but it won't be activated until somebody accepts that declaration at an office of departure. Now, whether it would have to be at the last stop before you get to Dover or Folkestone, or whether there'll be regional centres, possibly. I mean, it's quite interesting. I come from the old days of customs. We had lots of customs offices around the country, entry processing units. They're all closed. So there is one customs office, HMRC, which is in Salford, the National Clearance Hub. So what we're relying on actually in a lot of these locations is Border Force officials doing customs work. So it's going to be interesting who will actually be running these car parks, who will actually be providing that service. Will it be customs? Will it be private entities that will fulfill that? Again, it's one of the areas we haven't really seen any clarity about, other than these areas have been apparently purchased and tarmac being laid. But yeah, it could well be the car parks will act as well as a last stop, a holding point, car park, traffic congestion. You can see there could be a facility to operate as an office departure, much like Stop 24 does today on the route into Dover.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. And Bernard, have you heard anything around car parks and being used as starting for transit?
Well, not really. I mean, we know, and as Martin has said, the Border Force will be responsible for everything that goes on at the frontier, because he rightly pointed out that there is no presence at the frontier. Revenue and Customs don't exist at the frontier anymore. They live in the National Clearance Hub in Salford, and that's the one EPU, if you like, in the United Kingdom. I think Border Force have probably already mapped out exactly where they're going to do the physical inspections, because, as Martin said, we'll be doing arrived entries. That means that when we send the declaration to Chief, it will be processed immediately and a route will be allocated. If that route is a physical inspection, then the driver has to go somewhere to have his goods inspected, and it could well double up as an office of export, but for transit purposes. But I've certainly noticed that more and more traders are applying for transit simplifications. For example, traders wanting to become authorized consignors, which eliminates the need for reporting to an office of export. The transit movement starts at your premises, and I think that that is certainly, if you're going to be involved in transit, because your destination country might not be adjacent to the UK, and you'll have to go through another EU member state, then I would certainly be looking at becoming an authorised consignor for transit purposes. But in terms of the car parks, yes, I can see dual roles there. But again, it's as Martin said, well, it's down to ownership and who owns the places.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Alistair, you mentioned you were using NCTS and transit. I presume you're doing that from your own locations or not?
Yes, for each of our locations, both production and distribution side, we've registered and are approved for both consignor and consignee, because it's now vested interest in both directions. I'm having to look at it as a whole supply chain. Yep. What we've also ensured that each of our production facilities in Europe are also approved in the same way, also NCTS, and it's a slower burn because it depends which country as to how fast the approvals are being pushed through. But even some of our distribution countries are also going through NCTS consignee, so that we can again move goods across using transit across the community in the most efficient manner that we can, to try and avoid any of these delays or being stuck somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And do you have you just mentioned, so the time frame of getting the approval? Do you have a figure in your head that you work with as a guideline for achieving that approval timeframe at the moment?
UK-wise, production-wise, because we're AEO approved, then ours have been more prioritised. So we've been fortunate in that respect. Our European partners have been a little bit longer to go through, especially with the delays in us moving into transition. That's obviously caused complication because some customs authorities didn't want to actually process anything until they figured out which way things were going. But yeah, it's things do take longer. But actually, a lot of people working from home now. Some things are moving a little quicker as well because they're being assigned to people working from home and dealing with approvals. European, it is taking a little longer, but we've targeted each of our facilities to be in place certainly within the next couple of months, but must be in place by the end of the year. Ready for coming out of transition.
Okay, but you're looking at months rather than weeks or days for those approvals.
Yeah, we're kind of realistic on that in that instance, especially ones where if they haven't done them before, then it's taking them longer to get through because they're not necessarily as ready to put everything through that the officers want to understand. Whereas if you've done it a number of times, then actually you become more prepared as to what to do when you're submitting approvals.
Okay, good, thank you. And Tim, are you making a lot of use of transit or using transit, and are you using your own locations?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have consignee, consignor, NCTS, but really the only scope that we've been asked to deal with is stillage returns of part containers back into Germany and France. And that has been a relatively straightforward process for us. But we're prepared to extend that within the field that we specialise in, and that being the automotive industry as such. We're not prepared at this present moment to dip our toes into the fishery market or so forth. We just haven't got the skill sets in place to be able to support that kind of product movement throughout the UK and Europe. Okay, good, thank you. And a slightly related question here from the audience around the Irish Sea Holyhead. Just the question here is, has anybody had updates regarding setting up an office of departure at Holyhead? So I guess maybe Bernard, you have clients in Ireland. Have you heard anything around Holyhead having an office of departure set up?
I haven't, Paul, and the reason I haven't is that I don't think Border Force possibly may not be on their radar at the moment. I do know last time round when we were talking about D1ND, Day One No Deal, that Border Force had set themselves up for transit operations at the other end of the island of Anglesey. I can't remember. I was just trying to find it, and I think it was a transport depot on the A55, and they were going to do phytosanitary inspections there, and they were going to have a transit office there. But since that all evaporated with the withdrawal agreement, and we went into the implementation period of the transition, I haven't heard anything. Now, you would have thought that it would be a sensible approach to have something, if not in Holyhead. The difficulty with Holyhead is that, and you see this with the likes of Stena Line and Irish Ferries, there is physically no room at Holyhead to accommodate virtually anything, never mind trucks coming off the ferry. And so if there is going to be something near the port of Holyhead, I would imagine it'll be somewhere on the island of Anglesey, but I haven't heard anything at the moment. But I will take that one away and see if I can find out any more information. Okay, thank you. And related maybe to this topic as well, and certainly very topical, GVMS. I think the question here is, what happens if GVMS isn't ready? So maybe Martin, I've heard you mention GVMS
lovingly over the last few weeks. So would you like to answer that one? You're on mute, Martin, sorry.
Sorry, there's two phases to GVMS. So I think if we look first to the 1st of January, then GVMS was only planned to be used as support for the Office of Transit, as transit movements come into the UK or into Northern Ireland, and for movements into Northern Ireland itself. So there, if GVMS doesn't exist, there'd have to be an alternative methods for dealing with transit movements, which could be established, and for processing these CDS declarations into Northern Ireland, because the whole idea would be the declaration would be started before the goods leave as a kind of pre-arrived, pre-lodged, and then as the goods cross the Irish Sea, GVMS would activate those declarations so they could be risked and any revenue taken if there was any revenue. That could be replaced by saying, well, don't do them as pre-arrived declarations, do them as arrived declarations. The notification of movements, yeah, there could be alternatives to that, I guess. So there could be contingencies. The main reason for using GVMS was to allow hauliers to have a single reference they could report to customs to report to the carriers on the way out. So instead of giving them a pile of MRN numbers or a pile of paperwork saying, look, I've done all my declarations I need to, they would just have a single reference number. So the fallback would always be, well, just waive the pile of paperwork, and then they'd have to check individually. For goods from the 1st of July, when GVMS is supposed to take care of the UK EU movements, so again from the EU to the UK, the same could apply. If GVMS is still not ready, they could just maybe extend the 6 months where we have this relaxation. So you either do EIDR or you do a pre-lodge declaration, and then they expect the declarant to amend the declaration to show its arrived status within 24 hours of its actual arrival. That could continue beyond the 6 months. For exports, as we already said, from the 1st of January, they have to be declared as arrived anyway. All GVMS really does is introduce an extra step to check the goods on the way out. And for excise goods in particular, I'm thinking GVMS should also then provide the evidence of exit for discharging EMCS or export liability, because again, on the way out, the MRN number of the export declaration will be linked to a GVMS record. The shipping line or the carrier will report that GVMS movement as of left, and that would be the kind of equivalent of a departure notice today on chief. So it's not critical for the movements, it facilitates those movements. So if it doesn't actually come to fruition or not fully, it will just make life more difficult, but yeah, it would be the same really.
And Tim and Alistair, have you sort of GVMS came along quite sort of relatively late in the day for Brexit preparedness. Have you brought GVMS fully into your plans? Are you comfortable with it there, and how it will impact you guys in terms of your movements? And maybe start with Tim.
We've made all our OEMs aware of this changing process. The impact we see at the present moment is it's a technical impact for us really, in as much as there's an additional process for us to have to be aware of. The OEMs are quite relaxed, to be fair, because the majority of the products that we deal with are imports compared to the exports of goods. So I would suggest that the overall impact has been minimal to us at the moment, but we envisage that if it's not ready, they're going to do what they've been suggesting, which is, they're just going to push it back for another 6 months and just make it an easement, because again, the whole process, as you look at it, it has been a case of let's take a block period of making life easy and giving people enough time to actually get used to the requirements over a number of processing.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. And Alistair, how have you dealt with GVMS, and how much of a issue is it for you as to whether it's ready or not?
We're kind of just working with it as it comes. We've got everything in place that either through your services or with the broker services that on both sides. So I guess we just kind of have to work it with. We're not terribly worried about it, but it is a concern as to which process do we end up having to follow more than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So maybe changing the topic slightly again here. Heat-treated pallets. Any clarity yet as to whether heat-treated pallets will be mandatory for imports and exports? Bernard, do you want to start us off on that one?
That's a tricky one, Paul. I suspect Tim might have an answer to that. I mean, the current ISPM regs are quite clear. Anything entering the European Union from a third country has to follow those regulations. But everything that swirls around inside the EU, and that includes the UK in the transition period, the rules don't necessarily apply because it's adjudged that the UK, former member of the European Union, the rules and regs, we carry them out to the letter. But in the absence of, we're back to the small print of any deal that may be done with the EU. If a deal isn't done, and if there is an issue about the ISPM regs, then clearly pallets will have to be heat treated. If you're a glass half full person, you might think, well, we'll get there, it'll be fine. I'm not going to worry about it. They'll treat the UK the same as they treat us now. But if I'm a glass half empty kind of person, I think I'd be looking to a day one no deal scenario and making sure that my pallets were correct under the regulations. I would assume that that would be my priority. But as I say, Tim and maybe Alistair, who both will presumably use this types of pallet in their movements, might be able to. Tim perhaps might be able to provide a little more information. Tim.
Well, pallets aren't our forte, I'm afraid. I think sort of the best one. Yeah, I mean, everything we actually utilise is on four wheels normally. So, but I'm sure those bottles of Bacardi do need palletising correctly.
Thanks, Tim. Alistair, pallets, are they a concern for you? Treated or not?
We use a considerable volume of pallets coming in and out the country in every version of what we do. We are currently checking with our providers of pallets to see both to confirm that they are compliant with current and future legislation, which we know they're compliant with current. But it is a concern, or it has been a concern, to make sure that with any changing rules that our providers will keep us supplied with currently approved pallets. It is one of those very much that we're having to stay close with our partners and suppliers to make sure that it's not just about us staying compliant, it's about them doing the same.
Okay, good. Thank you. And maybe I was going to change topic again here. RoRo. So the question here is about a little bit technical, or at least technical for me anyway. So it's about, will the UK-EU RoRo declarations need to be inventory linked? Martin, I'll probably start with you on that one.
Yeah, the real driver as to whether they need to be inventory linked is not a customs one. It's really going to be the port's decision. So, we've touched on GVMS. So what you're going to see come July or whenever the end of the UK's implementation period will be, is that ports will operate one of two models. They'll either have an inventory system, a temporary storage model, or they'll be using GVMS. but that is going to be down to the individual ports to decide. We were promised a list from customs of what ports had made what decision. That's not been forthcoming yet. I think we've heard maybe the Port of Tilbury is going to extend its ro-ro terminals into its port inventory system. Harwich may do the same with the Port of Felixstowe, so it may just incorporate it within the same port inventory system. So they don't have to be inventory linked, but some may choose to be inventory linked, depending on their infrastructure and whether it facilitates the movement of trailers and vehicles through their ports. They may get benefits out of using a port community system that they would otherwise have to employ manual labour, for example, or manual checks, if it was GPMS.
Okay, and there was a slightly related question to this, which was to what degree might sort of regional ports see an uplift in containers as current sort of ro-ro traffic through Dover seeks more sort of resilience and reliability? Any view on that?
Yeah, it's not only containerized traffic. I think what I was hearing as well, when you follow a lot of the conversations, is it's more about accompanied versus unaccompanied. So, there might be a lot of situations where EU drivers and trucking companies don't want to have their cabs sent over to the UK and sat in the UK. So, as well as current trailer traffic becoming containerized, which is a possibility, how many will actually go from accompanied trailers, roll on, roll off, to unaccompanied trailers, so lift on, lift off. That could well be a trend we would see as well. But yeah, I'll defer to the logistics experts as to what they're seeing on their side.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So maybe I'll come to Alistair first this time. And just, are you seeing anything around changes from ro-ro into other forms, containers or lift on, lift off? Are you expecting to see anything around that, Alistair?
I think from our perspective, we're looking more on the security side, because the impact of thefts both coming into the UK and heading out of the UK means we're pushing our traffic more towards containerized if we can. So I suppose it's less about which ports they're going through, more that we're trying to move to a containerized traffic version in and out of the UK to protect our goods rather than rather than the flow. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Tim, what are you sort of seeing in this area of ro-ro versus container? Is yours predominantly ro-ro?
The predominantly ro-ro. We do very small containerized movements to countries like Iceland through IMSCIP and that kind of thing for products being containerized there. But in principle, I mean, there is this, I would suggest that quite a few OEMs that bring products transported through Dover have moved their logistics away from that to ro-ro shipping into the northern ports or even directly to Southern Ireland, so that the product that normally would have gone by transported through the UK to Ireland is actually now being shipped directly through to Ireland itself. So they're clearly looking at the logistic routing with concerns that they don't want to add or be held up at the pinch points of Dover and Felixstowe. So there is a considerable amount of change of logistics, which we then have to adapt to as a customs broker for these OEMs to also provide that service as well.
Okay, good, thank you. So then just maybe on the, and Bernard will probably come to you with this one, but again, looking back to delays at the ports, the question here is that in the case of major delays at customs, will priorities be made depending on product, or will it be a regular waiting line? So will it just be one line, or are we expect to see prioritization based on things such as product type?
Good question, really good question. If you look at the current mode of operation of the National Clearance Hub in Salford, they have a list of priorities, and top of their list would be live animals, and it would work its way down to fresh produce, chilled, frozen. So there will be, there does exist a list of priorities. It's as to whether they use that list in the event of delays at the ports. I would imagine in this COVID-19 era that we're in, that one of the top priorities is going to be PPE. So if anybody's got PPE, they're going out or coming in, that's likely to be a priority. But I would be very surprised if HM Revenue and Customs and Border Force haven't drawn up plans for some sort of prioritising. I'd be very surprised indeed.
I think, yeah, I mean, I would just add to that it really comes back to, again, the individual ports, because if you're in a port where they've got the capacity to have separate lanes, this is where the term route came from, but if they've got different lanes and they can direct different types of vehicles to different lanes, then you can have that kind of prioritization. Yeah. But if you've got just a single row of traffic, then it's very difficult to pull out the fifth truck back because it happens to be carrying fresh flowers or live cattle or something.
Agreed.
From a queue. So yes, you can prioritize in terms of the electronic clearance and in the processing of declarations, but physically segregating that flow of traffic could be tricky at certain ports, unless you allow all the flows to come through and leave that immediate area and sort that out later, in which case you can direct your live animals to one particular inspection area and standard goods elsewhere.
Or direct them all to a truck park.
Yeah. But of course, the other consideration is Border Force's current risks of people smuggling drugs, weapons. They will not want those trucks to go through away from the immediate port of entry before they do those checks. Yeah. So, those checks will still be done at the first point of entry. All the other even the phyto checks, if you have live flowers or bulbs or earth, once it enters the island of the United Kingdom, it's here. Any potential pests or risks have already got through. So, it really does depend on what the risks are, what the checks are intended for, and the physical capacity of a particular port.
Good point, Mark.
Yeah, and as again on the topic of delays, the question here is, are we aware, is the panel aware of the government and EU placing new routes or additional routes into the UK? Has anybody heard of any discussion on this?
No, I mean, I think coming to what Bernard said about the route from Belgium to Ireland, I think this will be left for commercial decisions. I think it was CLDN introduced their new route. I think they've added more vessels to that route because they saw an opportunity there. In terms of traffic that we'll want to avoid the United Kingdom. There may well be small ports on the East Coast. There may be, carriers that will see opportunities, but I've not heard of the government engaging, looking for those.
Yeah, okay. And Tim, in terms of the East Coast, have you seen anything on the East Coast about new routes?
Not particularly. I mean, one of the things I wanted to highlight was I attended last year the Humber Emergency Planning Committees and their process of deciding how to support the ports should they become saturated as such, and prioritising goods that way. They were literally going to close the ports off. And the so-called car parks that people talk about, they had staged areas as to how busy they were, going outwards from the Humber right out to the Midlands, really, to then call in the prioritised units from those particular locations. So they would literally not allow the goods to enter the port areas at all. They'd be stored outside the port area, so the port would then be able to have flow of goods in and out in a much more controlled process. And that was quite interesting in the way that they were going to process those units in and out from the ports, from locations 50 miles away in some cases.
Right.
Yeah, but as to additional flow, DFDS are increasing their routing, but mainly from Liverpool to Ireland for additional shipping that we've seen. So there is concern about the we get notification clearly of additional routing for produce going into Ireland and out of Ireland directly. But beyond that, then really it's just additional new shipping in the normal scheme of things. Large vessels carrying more product.
Right. Thank you. And Alistair, are you seeing anything in terms of increasing routes and route capacity? Or?
Our production facility is actually based in Scotland, sometimes the operating hours of those ports does create capacity issues for us, which is why we route a good chunk of our export and EU movements through the southern ports, but it does depend on which final destination it's heading to. But it's also why our global transport team have had to consider different routes coming in and out of the UK, but haven't heard of additional capacity. I think the key driver for us is additional opening hour capacity at some of the ports that are currently not 24 hours, and that can cause, especially on production facilities, can cause issues because you have to base which port it's going to as to when it's exiting out of the production facility, heading for that port.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. And there's another question here just around authorized consignor. So the question is, if a logistics company we have authorized consignor and operate from a TSF, which will perform the customs clearance on site, is there still a risk that the trailer could be delayed at the port? I guess maybe Martin, I'll ask you to.
Yeah, I would say there should be no additional delays than you would experience today coming through that border, because if you're using transit and they're going to be discharged at a temporary storage facility inland, then there's no fiscal controls. There would be potentially health checks. So, we talked about wooden pallets. Yes, is there a chance that maybe a truck gets pulled to check that the pallets are heat treated? That's a potential risk. Otherwise, Border Force should be just deploying the same checks they do today, which would be on a risk basis for human smuggling, people smuggling, drug smuggling, excise fraud, all the stuff that is currently happening across the border today within the single market. So those checks are done today. Trucks do get delayed for those checks. They could be stopped and inspected. There's no reason that will stop just because you're running transit and a temporary storage facility. But anything related to the customs clearance shouldn't generate any delays at the frontier at the port.
Yeah.
Okay. And another one here, just asking about customs warehouse. Will it make customs easier? Should I apply for customs warehouse? Will it make customs easier? Bernard, do you want to give it?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to take that one, Paul. We've seen an increase in people applying for customs warehouses, but I don't, from my own point of view, I wouldn't necessarily see that as something that would be needed for trade beyond Brexit with the EU 27. There would need to be, I think, particular, perhaps niche circumstances why you would want a customs warehouse, but I wouldn't have thought it was something that certainly, again, if it was myself, I'm not sure that I would be thinking about a customs warehouse, unless, of course, I was involved in the distribution of produce from the EU 27, and in in those circumstances, I may well want to keep the produce under customs control until it's been sold. So if I'm a distributor, perhaps the answer would be yes. But if I'm an importer, I would think probably no, just bring them into free circulation. But always check the tariff. Always check the tariff. If it's 0 rated, if it's in our new UK global tariff, if it's not got a positive rate of duty, don't make life difficult for yourself. Bring it into home use.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'd agree, Ben. I mean, many things with customs aren't a one size fits all. You know, it's very much each company's got to look at its business and work out what the benefits. So if your aim is just to facilitate customs clearance, then the previous question about authorized consignee and temporary storage would potentially meet that need. If your concern is about storing goods for a long period of time that's subject to duties, yeah, customs warehousing is a solution. If you're worried about double taxation, so you've got, as Bernard said, you've got goods coming in from China, you don't know if you're going to sell them on the UK market or the EU market, again, customs warehousing is the solution. If you're going to bring goods in for processing and don't know where they're going to end up, customs warehousing along with something like inward processing would be the solution. But it's really down to each company working out what is their where are their pain points. Is it just a clearance issue? Is it a duty issue, a tax issue? And then working out what components they can put together to make it work most efficiently for them.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And Tim and Alistair, any comments on the use of customs warehouse as a mechanism to facilitate ease of customs declarations and delays?
Well, the use of custom warehousing is very straightforward with the good support of good software. An essential tracking and trace of all the products is, you know, an absolute priority. But for our customers, customs warehousing for imported goods is an absolute must, just because of the volumes there and values they're talking. We're talking tens of billions of pounds worth. So, you know, not paying 500 million a month to HMRC can be quite attractive to the actual OEMs. But in simplistic terms, I really like the customs warehouse process. It's straightforward, and it doesn't really present any additional technical difficulties as you would do with a straightforward inter-free circulation. You're just delaying that process to whenever the goods are actually moved from the customs warehouse itself. So yeah, straightforward for us. It's a good process.
Yeah, and from looking at some of the aerial photographs of your facilities, you look as if you've got some of the largest outdoor customs warehouses around there.
Yeah, we will do. Yeah, and when HMRC do their unannounced visits and they go, "Can we look at this star?" and we take them sort of 5 miles away to have a look at it. You know, it's quite it can be quite entertaining. But it's just one of the jobs we do.
Yeah, very good, good. And Alistair, customs warehouse significant in your business or not?
Not at the moment, but we've looked at it from a perspective of it would be especially bringing goods in from around the world, it would be a cash flow benefit because obviously if goods are liable for customs duty on the way into the country, the longer we can not pay customs, the better. You know, obviously we'll pay them when it leaves, but if we can bring it in, it also simplifies some of the clearance processes, because currently without a customs warehouse we would have to clear to free circulation but leave it excise suspended. So that just would make it a cleaner process. But so there's a process and a cash flow benefit to us doing it. But because we work with 3PLs, then we have to work with them to gain those approvals on our behalf effectively.
Right.
It's a work in progress, but having worked with it in previous life, it's definitely beneficial from a clearance and cash flow perspective as a business. Okay,
good, thank you. And we're probably coming towards the conclusion here in terms of the questions, but there's one here which would be good, maybe just Alistair, I'll probably stay with you and then come back to Tim again. But the question here is, are the panel aware of many companies establishing contingency stock holdings in the EU to mitigate issues and delays?
Coincidentally, yes. The last couple of times we've been coming out of the EU, we've gone for contingency each time on both sides of the channel to try and protect ourselves, so we're not moving goods in between times, especially over the exit date and time frame. With this time round for January, we've opted not to do it because we can build enough stock into the markets anyway, certainly around Europe and in the UK, that rather than over provision it, we're just making sure we don't distribute over the transition periods, end of December into the kind of first week or two of January. So more protecting ourselves that way rather than building extra stock package, because actually for all of our production facilities to overproduce on a short notice is not straightforward for any production company. We've opted that we'll kind of build it in over a period of time rather than go for a concentrated stock build.
Okay.
Some of our partner companies, especially within the whisky industry that we also sit in, many of them are following a similar principle.
Right. And just out of interest, is the sort of alignment of end of transition being just after Christmas and Christmas being a period where your products are sort of consumed probably as a peak, has that made any impact on your planning, that they both aligned at this time?
It helps to a degree, because actually heading for season time of the year through November, December, most people and most companies would have, in our industry, would have shipped into the markets by that point, especially as and therefore heading past Christmas, even after New Year, then most people's in our industry's stock levels would have reduced down sufficiently that the risk to the businesses, you would have naturally depleted enough stock that you would start replenishing in mid-January onwards.
Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. And Tim, same question. Are you seeing any sort of companies establishing contingency stock holdings in the EU to mitigate issues around delays?
Well, I would actually turn that around. It's the EU putting product into the UK. They did this last time with Day One No Deal. They literally looked to put the first quarter product into the UK prior to December 31st. And we've been advised that production levels will be increased again, although I don't think to the levels upon which they did last time. And they will look to get as much product into the bonded warehouse prior to 31st of Jan, just to save themselves 3 months duty on the units they put into the UK. So they will heavily arm themselves to do that because of the financial benefit it is to them to get the product into the UK. Now in reverse, there isn't quite that need. Because if the product they're putting into the EU, we're not seeing that same commitment, but certainly inbound, there was a strategic planning for quite a considerable amount of volume coming our way in the Christmas period. Forget Christmas for quite a lot of our boys; they're going to be very, very busy, for sure.
Interesting. Okay, good. Thank you.
If I may, just a quick point. I don't know if else is suffering the same way, but we are noticing that COVID is having an impact on the labour resources within the port structures, which eventually does reduce the actual productivity of the ports overall. So that coming along, if we do get a second wave again towards the end of this year, coming along to then having Brexit happen, is kind of a little perfect storm that's coming up. So when you were talking about concerns, actually what we're witnessing now is a slow deterioration in productivity within the ports themselves for our specific products, But I wonder if that is actually, filtering out to other products as well that are entering the ports.
Yeah, and I guess, Alistair, are you seeing anything in relation to that Tim is?
Not too much. The usual weather delays, but not too much in terms of port disruptions. But that, I guess, we're more fortunate in that pace.
Okay. Okay. Good. So we're just coming towards the end. I think maybe just one last quick, someone looking for tips. So anybody got any tips on handling double taxation?
Yeah,
Bernard?
That's not my area of access to double taxation. Martin might like to say something on it.
Yeah, I assume we're not talking about sending my pay to the Panama bank, but I mean, if we're talking about double taxation in terms of customs duties, I think it's really a realization now that for those companies that were distributing from UK to the EU or EU to the UK, that if they pay duty on first entry, they're going to end up paying duty again when they distribute the goods. So they've got to really look at customs warehousing, as we said, is an obvious one, whether that's they do it themselves or via a 3PL in the ports of like Rotterdam or Felixstowe or wherever. The other one is yeah, we've seen it. We have seen companies change their supply chains so that where they're sending goods that are for delivery to Europe directly into Europe, and goods for the UK coming to UK. Even Amazon, have made that clear on changes to their terms and conditions on their platform. Where they would have previously stored goods in their Luxembourg warehouse and sent them to the UK, or in the UK they would have sent them to the Netherlands. They're now segregating those two stores. So if you buy something from Europe, it will be treated the same way as if you were buying it directly from China. So there's different terms and conditions. So you're definitely seeing that movement as well to avoid that kind of double handling, double customs processes, double taxation.
Okay. And then maybe just the last quite specific question here to Bernard. There's a request here for help with training agencies for customs clearance training in London. So if you're able to address that.
Well, here comes a sales pitch. Of course, we ourselves, Strong and Herd, do training in customs entries, exports and imports, and we partner up with Descartes. We use their software, and we're happy to train anyone on the use of customs declarations, either on CHIEF or CDS. But to be fair, and most of our training is virtual at the moment because of COVID-19. But if you go on to gov.uk, you will find, courtesy of HM Revenue and Customs, a list of established trainers in all things Brexit and customs. So, as I say, we're quite happy to train people, and we do it. But if you go to gov.uk, you'll find a full list of approved trainers on the HM Revenue and Customs website.
Very good. Okay, thanks, Bernard. So we're going to wrap up here. I think if there's for the audience listening, the slides and recordings will be available here post the event. Also, for those who want to find out more information about being ready and helping them get ready for Brexit, the Descartes.com website has a /Brexit/get ready set of pages on there as well, which has got links and tips around getting ready for Brexit to cover many of these points that were discussed here this morning. So just to finish up here, I'd like to thank the panelists. So thanks to Tim, Alistair, Bernard and Martin for their contributions here this morning. And thank you to all of those who have put questions into them. And we'll finish up there. And thank you very much. Good morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.